Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the Property Podcast. We've been building up to it for a while, but yes, it's time. Rob's releasing his book, and it's How to Be a Landlord. So this week on the Property Podcast, we teach you just that.
Yes, we do. Thank you for joining us for episode 215 of the Property Podcast, which will not just be an extended monologue about my book. There'll be loads to learn in here as well, sharing loads of property management tricks that are taken from the book, but also that we've learned from Yellow and from our own portfolios. So it's going to be another of those intense note-taking episodes if we do our job right. Before we get into all that, though, a quick note that meetups are taking place next week. Yes, it's come round again. How did that happen? It's the first Thursday of the month. That means that we've got 40-odd meetups all around the UK and beyond. You should really go to one. If you haven't been to a meetup yet, make this your month. No excuses. It's nice and light in the evenings now. No reason not to get out and meet lots of other property-loving folk. Just go to thepropertyhub.net/meetups. You can see all of them on there. You can book your place. It's free. What more do we need to say to persuade you?
Not a lot, hopefully. However, you may need to be persuaded to go back to the polling booths. Yes, in between our last episode and this episode, Theresa May's decided we need another election. Hooray! I hear you not shouting. But we have one. So, Rob, it's going to be all about property.
Well, I quite like the concept of another election. I feel like it keeps them out of trouble, gives them something to do. If all we could do with like referendums and elections, then maybe we wouldn't have time to do anything damaging. So bring it on, I say. What does this mean? Well, it's interesting because I guess it means nothing much is going to be happening anytime soon in terms of property or anything else, because everyone's going to be busy focusing on that and then all the negotiations and so on. If we do come back with a larger Conservative majority, then maybe that gives them more leeway to do yet more stuff that we don't really want them to do. But hey, what will the outcome be? I'm not going to be in the prediction game. I don't think anyone smart will be either, given the last couple of years.
No, it's all up for grabs. We'll see. Of course, if there's anything property related as we build up to the big event, we'll keep you in the loop on the Property Podcast. But it was a big story, but it wasn't the biggest story this week. So you'd think an election would be. But of course, Theresa May could not outdo our very own Mr. Dix, who this week is launching his latest book, How to Be a Landlord. And I'm really, as I touched on this last week, really excited about this book because I feel it's the one that was missing. It was the next logical step. It was the one that was begging to be written by Rob, especially as not only is he a landlord, helps thousands and thousands of investors through the work we do, like on a podcast and a forum and everything else, but also runs Yellow Lettings with myself. So much experience there. It's almost criminal not to put it in a book. And the great thing is, he has. So this week, we're going to be looking at the lessons from that book that you can take away for free, but you'll probably be so encouraged that you'll want to get a copy yourself. But Rob, before we get into this week's topic, pressure off now? You feeling pretty smug? You feeling pretty happy with yourself? It's all done and dusted and you can start sleeping again?
Well, hopefully so. We're recording this in advance. This will come out the day after the book launch. So hopefully I've had a good night's sleep and I'm feeling great. Unless loads of terrible reviews have come in and I'm up just like throwing things at my computer and screaming. But it should be good. It definitely feels good to have it written, and I agree that it feels like it's a book that needed to be written. There are so many landlords I know, even friends of mine, you would have thought they would know better than to do this and get lectured by me, who are letting properties, not doing it properly, storing up problems for themselves, making their lives difficult. And even if you're using a letting agent, I really think it's important to educate yourself about the basics. You don't necessarily need to know every last little detail, but you should know about what your agent is doing. Property is not the kind of investment where you can just kind of buy it and forget about it, abdicate all responsibility. You need to know what's going on. And I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world. It's not as exciting as going out and like planning your empire and building that portfolio. So that's why I tried to bring it all together and make it as entertaining and straightforward as possible. So if you would like to pick up a copy of the book, you'll find a link to it and you'll find links to everything else we talk about in today's show notes, which are at thepropertyhub.net/howtobealandlord. And in this episode, we're going to be focusing on one section of the book, which is about property management. So if you do self-manage, how do you be a landlord? How do you manage the property? How do you, more importantly, make it easier? How do you use those little tricks and processes to give yourself an easier time and to give your tenants a better experience? That's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so first up, communicating with tenants. So we talked last week about how to set the property up. Then we'll assume that you've read the book and you therefore know how to find tenants the right way and to reference them and everything else. All that has gone swimmingly. You've got tenants in. You're going to need to communicate with them. And when you do, ideally, writing is better than on the phone because, phone calls can be inconvenient. You need to both catch each other. And also, if you put things in writing, then you've got like an audit trail if you need one. So try to do things in writing, but that doesn't mean you need to send letters to each other. I mean, you can do whatever's easiest for you or for them. So it can be as informal as you like. It can be text. It can be a WhatsApp group. It can be Facebook. Landlords who I've spoken to, especially HMO landlords, find that the best method of communication is the one that the tenants actually use. So it really doesn't matter. Just pick one that works and go for it. And you don't even have to give out your actual phone number at first if you don't want to. You might want to. You might be comfortable doing that. But if you don't want to, there are lots of alternatives. So you could get a Skype number that forwards to your phone, or there's a service called switchboardfree that sets up a like a call answering system. You could even have different extensions if you want to be fancy. It can take messages and all that sort of thing. Whatever you choose, set it up however works for you. But it's really important to set out ground rules at the start of the tenancy about when you're contactable and what to contact you about, and then stick to those ground rules. So especially early on, it's really important to get things straight from the start because you might be really eager at first. And if your tenant calls up at 10 at night about something relatively minor, you might be happy on that occasion to deal with it straight away because you want to give them a good experience. But you might not then want to continue doing that for the rest of the tenancy. So it's not a good idea to set out the expectation that you're contactable anytime and you can just jump. It doesn't mean that you're going to be slack, but if office hours is what it is, then set that straight at the beginning. So getting that communication right is really important. And it's especially important around the most important issue of all, getting that rent paid.
Yeah, it seems to be pretty popular with landlords getting paid, and understandably so. So you do all that work and you should be paid for it. You give someone a home. So what can you do? Well, you could consider using a direct debit system for getting paid. If it's set up correctly, you will know you'll always get paid if they have money in the account because it takes it out automatically. And if the tenant decides to cancel it because they don't want that money coming out, you'll be notified. You'll know. So consider using direct debits instead of just a basic standard order with your bank. It may sound complicated as well, but there's loads of services out there which can help you with this for very little money. Now, once you know the day that your rent's coming in, and you may try and get the same day with every tenant, diarise it and make contact on the same day if that rent does not come in. So don't wait a week or two and then go, oh, it's still not in. Probably should do something now. Get on it straight away. Because if you're relaxed about rent being paid, your tenants will be. So if it's not in, get in contact straight away. And have a process. Don't 1 month you're feeling great, so you'll let it lie for a few days. The next month you're super aggressive and calling them 7 times in the first day. Have a process. For example, it could be the first day you text them. Day 3, you call them. Day 5 is a final warning. Whatever it may be, it doesn't matter what process you use, but just have one. Really important, and it's harder said than done, particularly when you're self-managing, but don't fall for sob stories. A lot of people will give you good reasons to them why they can't pay. And they may be genuine and maybe not, but sob stories don't help you. If you get into arrears with that property, then it doesn't help anybody. So don't fall for sob stories. One of the hardest parts, I think, of self-managing, but you just need to be disciplined with that too. However, if you have rent guarantee insurance, you can probably relax a bit. Make sure you notify them, though, within the terms and conditions they lay out. So if they need to know within a day or two that the rent isn't in, then make sure you do that. Don't invalidate your guarantee by just being lax. But if you've got one, it helps you relax about all the other things we've just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. So you hope that you won't need to do too much chasing of the rent and it will just come in. You also hope that you won't have any emergencies to deal with. But chances are, if you self-manage for long enough or you have enough properties, then you will have some kind of emergency cropping up. First, though, really important to define what an emergency is. So An emergency, as I consider it, is something that poses immediate risk to the health of the occupants or to the structure of the property. So if the property's on fire, yes, it's an emergency. If there's water coursing through the ceiling, it is. If it's freezing cold and the heating packs in, then maybe it is. It possibly depends on the occupants as to whether it can wait till the next day or not. But get clear about what an emergency is. So when tenants move in, ideally provide them with written instructions about what to do in different types of emergency. Because often calling you isn't the best thing to do. So if the property's on fire, clearly calling you to report it isn't a smart idea. If they smell gas, then there is a national number and someone will come out in 2 hours to investigate. Calling you in that situation probably isn't the best thing to do because what are you going to do about it? If there's a major leak, maybe you are the best person to call, but ideally you've found a plumber who offers a 24-hour service and they can call that plumber and sort it out directly. If you get all that straight at the start, it will eliminate, hopefully, all of those things that landlords complain about. You'll hear it all the time. It's like, I could never be a landlord. I don't want to be called up in the middle of the night about something trivial. Well, hopefully that won't happen because you'll know what an emergency is. And if calling you in the middle of the night isn't the best way of getting that resolved, then that won't happen. So again, it all comes back to this clear communication, which has been a theme through everything that we've talked about so far. Another little trick that you can do is consider getting landlord emergency insurance. So this is an insurance policy that will cover you, depending on the policy, normally about the heating, plumbing, security of the property, that sort of thing. And what they'll do is give you a phone number that you can pass on to the tenants. If there's an emergency, the tenant can call that number. Someone will come round and resolve the emergency straight away, and you will only find out about it afterwards. And normally the cost of making that repair is covered up to, say, £500 or whatever the limit of the policy is. So that's pretty cool for two reasons. It means the problem is sorted out and you don't have to pay for it unless it gets really expensive. And you don't even have to do anything. You don't have to get phoned about it. You only find out after it's already happened. So like with all insurance, you have to really weigh up whether it makes sense for you, whether it makes more sense to self-insure. But it can be a nice way of taking some of the pressure off. Hopefully, you won't have too many emergencies to deal with, but there will always, of course, be the more routine matters to take care of.
So let's look at maintenance. One of the first things you need to do is build up a trade contacts and treat them well. So if you find a good handyman or woman, make sure you pay them on time. Make sure you're polite and courteous, which I know listeners you would be, because they are worth their weight in gold. They will sort out a lot of issues for you because most of the issues in a property are small and easily fixed. But before you even get to that point, if they are that easily fixed, then try and work with the tenant before a visit is sorted, before you go along or someone else goes along. Try and just check a few basic things. I mean, is it just the washing machine filter? Is it just that the fridge freezer needs defrosting? Is it that they need to unblock the sink? It could be really simple things. They may sound very stressed and dramatic about the circumstances, but if you understand a few basic things that go wrong day to day, and it's easy to build that knowledge because most people live in homes. We haven't got many listeners in caves and tents. So because of that, you know what goes wrong in your own home. If you understand a few of the basic things that just go wrong more regularly, you can help them avoiding having someone come around to their home at all. Now, a big one, a really big one, is communicate clearly around damp and condensation and explain the difference. Tenants often get wound up and frustrated about damp or condensation. It happens in new builds a lot as well as they're still drying out, and they immediately start thinking they've got terrible damp in their home or apartment or whatever it may be. It's often, nearly always, not the case. It's because they're not allowing enough air in the property and not opening the windows. So use routine inspections. This isn't just for new builds, I must add, but it's just when new builds are first complete, it happens, and then it then sorts itself out in time. But in any property, this can happen. So on inspections, look for this. If you see that there's starting to be condensation building up in certain areas in a property, which could lead on to damp, then make sure you are educating them about circulation, about having the windows open to avoid that altogether. So make sure you have those conversations early on. Prevention is better than cure with these type of things. Easily done. It's just a conversation that you need to make sure is hit home. And once it is, then you should be fine.
Yeah, number one source of referrals to environmental health. It's always damp, and damp often is condensation. So it happens absolutely all the time. And if you can sort of help them to use the property in a way that avoids it early, then far, far better. Also, something you can look out for on your inspections, and inspections are really important again. So if you are self-managing, you really should be going to inspect the property at least a couple of times a year. If you're lucky enough to have long-term tenants and they're there for 3 years, 5 years, and you don't go and see the property at all during that time, you might be unpleasantly surprised by what you get back at the end. But also, you miss the opportunity to look for lots of checks that will not only improve things for the tenant, but make your life easier and cheaper as well. So when you go in for an inspection, you don't have to be there for more than 15, 20 minutes. All you need to do is do a quick visual check of each room. So it's not like you're doing the whole inventory again. Just do a quick check of each room, note down its condition, and look for early signs of any repairs that will be needed. And that includes external repairs as well. So it's hard to see, but you might be able to see that the drains or the gutters are getting clogged. And so it's better to sort those out before water starts running down the walls and actually causing damp. So look for those early signs of repairs, because of course, if you can get onto these things early, it's going to be much cheaper than if you wait to deal with it once it becomes a real problem. And your tenant's going to be a lot happier as well. So look for all those things. Look for condensation, like we just talked about. Look for those early signs so you can nip those in the bud. And also check the safety features. So make sure that the smoke alarms are working. In your tenancy agreement, if you've got a good one, then it will say that it's the tenant's responsibility to check the alarms and make sure they're working. But nevertheless, still a good idea to do it yourself. Have a visual inspection of the electrics. Make sure that the plugs don't look scorched. There's no wires hanging out. They're not overloading the sockets by plugging lots of multi-way adapters into things and making it look dangerous. Look for any fire risks coming from the way the property is being used. Just go through and look for the really obvious stuff. Note it all down, and ideally get it signed by the tenant, and then you're done. It's all about being proactive, being on top of things, and getting ahead of the game. Inspections are a brilliant opportunity to do that. If you do it properly, then you should be able to prevent lots of more serious things from happening down the line.
Okay, so lots covered and lots more covered in Rob's book. As we wrap this up, the first thing you should be considering is whether this is for you or not at all. If you've not invested yet, then maybe the thought of being a landlord isn't for you. Make the decisions before you get started. So make that choice. Am I going to self-manage and educate myself? Or am I going to be hands-off and use a letting agent, but still educate myself? Either way, as Rob said, educate yourself, but make a decision. Know yourself, is this right for you or not? If you go ahead with this and you do decide to be a hands-on landlord, then make sure you're working smart and not hard. Don't try and create a second job, especially if you only manage 1 or 2 properties. Make sure you're working smart and make life easier for yourself. Things like checklists are great. We use checklists in everything we do, in the management of properties, to our businesses, to our home lives, our own personal lives. We use checklists. Checklists are really powerful because it helps you get the same top quality results every single time. Be proactive is another key takeaway from this. Don't just sit back and let things happen, and then when there's enough noise and enough problem, then you do something about it. Being a good landlord is always being proactive, being on top of things, having those regular inspections, making sure that you chase the rent when it's due straight away, not letting maintenance issues run on, paying people on time. It's all about being on it. Don't be relaxed. Don't procrastinate on tasks when it comes to managing a property. Make sure you're on it every time without exception. And then finally, the most important thing you can do is buy Rob's book. Yes, we've talked about it a lot leading up to this, but we've sandwiched in loads and loads of content around the book. Because there's so much in there, we've been able to do a few episodes off the back of it, and that's absolutely brilliant, but we've only just scratched the surface. So if this is a subject that you want to know more about, which really, if you're listening to this, you should, because you should know how to be a landlord, because even if you're going to have your properties managed, one day you may have to manage them yourselves, or you may get with an agent that isn't very good. So you need to know what should and shouldn't be doing and what standards should be kept. This book will give you the tools, will give you the knowledge, will give you that peace of mind to be able to be an effective landlord or be a confident hands-off investor. Whichever path you choose, this book will help you.
Hopefully so. And there is a bonus chapter as well about how to choose a letting agent and how to work with a letting agent. So even if you are going to be hands off, then there's some not just practical tips about how to do it, but how to find someone to do it on your behalf and make sure that they're actually doing it. So if you are interested in picking up the book, then you can do so via the show notes for this week, which are at thepropertyhub.net/how-to-be-a-landlord. Right, well, if there's one thing I like as much as talking about my book, it's talking about the lovely iTunes reviews that we receive. So I think, Rob, we should read one out right now.
Absolutely. And this week, our review comes in from Chloe Wilmot. Hi, Chloe. We know you well. How are you? Thank you for this review. Wow, these podcasts are brilliant. I'm still in the early stages of researching property investment and how it best serve me with my family. The podcasts are helping me make really exciting progress, and I know I will invest shortly. I found the content liberating, and I was reawakened my interest in the broader business topics, skills, and learning. The balance of entertainment and education is artfully achieved, and having worked my way through all of them over the last few weeks, I look forward to them on a weekly basis. Thanks, Rob and Rob, for the enlightening podcast every week. Well, thank you, Chloe. Thank you for your review.
Yes, thank you very much. Love to hear that. Okay, so before we wrap up, as ever, time for a quick resource of the week. And the resource of the week this week is a bit of a cheat. It's my book, How to Be a Landlord. But it's a resource of the week for this week for a very good reason. If you buy it this week, it's cheaper. So why wait for the price to go up? It's going to be selling for $12.99 on paperback. But for this week only, for launch week, it's £10. Did £10 deliberately because that is the cheapest price at which Amazon will deliver it to you for free. So you can get it on Kindle and audiobook as well. But if you want to get it as paperback, do it this week. So if you're not interested in it, absolutely fine. If you are interested in it, then save yourself a few quid and pick it up this week. So you can do that at thepropertyhub.net/how-to-be-a-landlord. Head over to Amazon, pick it up there. If you like it, leave us a review.
And make sure you do. Rob's too modest to say, but all his other books have gone down a storm. You only have to look on Amazon to see how well rated they are. Rob's a very, very talented writer. If you think he's a good podcaster, check out his books because they are exceptional. They get rave reviews for a reason, and this book is no exception. And while it's cheaper, why not? He's making it easy for you. So if there was a decision to make, it's now even easier than before. Go and grab yourself a copy. You will not be disappointed.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. B. Well, next week, we're going to be changing tack a little bit. We're going to be talking not about lettings, not even about buy-to-let. We're going to be talking about alternative investments. So we spend a lot of our time talking about buy-to-let. We spend a little less of our time talking about buying to sell and developments. But there's a whole world beyond that as well. And we're going to be diving into that next week.
We certainly will. So loads in the show notes this week. Make sure you get along to thepropertyhub.net/how-to-be-a-landlord. Get yourself along there. Find out all about Rob's book and also the special offer. But remember, it's a limited time only. So if you're listening to this in a few months' time, go and check it out. But what you'll see instead is probably a load of 5-star reviews and a book that you still should buy. But if you are on it and you're listening to it just after this is broadcast, then get along to Amazon and get that deal while you can. We'll be back, of course, on Tuesday with Ask Rob and Rob. And then we'll be back next week with the Property Podcast, as Rob said. But until then, Rob, you can have a lie down, and then we'll be back with the Property Podcast soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.